what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, I've got a smile on my face because after 2 days without power post Hurricane Milton, that was the Saturday that I wanted and hoped for. It was entertaining from start to finish in the SEC. We said the slate was really good, and I felt like it actually lived up to it. Yesterday was maybe my favorite Saturday of the year because of of course, circumstances outside of our control that preceded it. So I'm feeling very good right now, regardless of how wild it was and how difficult it was to process everything that happened in the SEC.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And welcome back. As you guys can tell, my voice is a little bit cooked from last night's LSU win. But it's glad to have you back, man. I think every team in the SEC kind of delivered outside of Oklahoma. Tennessee didn't deliver the way they would have liked to, but they delivered a great game. So we got lots of great games.
You could be all right. Reese, you good?
Oh yeah, bro. Listen, like I said, Reese Davis is a hero. That's why I shouted him out, because I said it after one LSU game.
Yeah, Will is Will, after the way that things played out for LSU on Saturday night, which, Death Valley at night, it always just kind of wins out. We're going to get to that in just a second here. But it happens even when you're not there, even when you're hundreds of miles away, just at home watching. It was definitely that type of game. It was a wild Saturday, wild Saturday. And I feel like I'm trying not to say that each and every time we come on a Sunday pod, but just to recap for the people here who might have lost track of it, maybe you were out doing other things for some crazy reason. Even though Week 7 the slate was good going in, it was great the way that it played out. In the SEC alone, we had 2 overtime games. We had Alabama and Georgia playing in much closer games than their fan bases probably wanted. I mean, Alabama's was obviously even closer than Georgia's. We had a Red River blowout that I actually thought was really entertaining for a good amount of it. Diego Pavia still runs the world. This is the Diego Pavia world. We are living in his existence, his version of whatever world it is. This is him. And then not quite a Ryan Bamford flex results, but still a Ryan Bamford flex game wherein Mizzou wins by 1 billion points. And I know that we don't typically talk about SEC against Group of 5 or FCS just because there's so much to get to, but we will get to some UMass thoughts at the end.
Listen, he got the gate revenue. That's not coming back. He got the money out of that game. He wins the day.
He does. He definitely does. All right, let's start with the game that that has you a little bit less than 100% right now. Ole Miss and LSU. Well, that game delivered a top 15 matchup that felt important, and gosh darn it was. Death Valley at night. It just always delivers. It does. For Lane Kiffin, that is a brutal pill to swallow, because that was the type of regular season win that was on the table, and it has eluded him for so long to win on the road like that. Ole Miss did not trail in that football game until LSU's walk-off touchdown in overtime by your boy, Kyron Lacey, who had a nice move in space, and boom, just like that. When he paused after he caught that ball, I thought he was looking at the official, and the official was about to flag him for offensive pass interference. A little bit of hand fighting going on there. I think LSU would have rioted if they had called that a penalty. But the back and forth, and then he realizes, like, no, I'm too cool for this. I got to pose in this moment. And man, even after Ole Miss hits a 57-yard field goal in overtime, they still can't win that game.
Yep.
LSU at night, man. I just can't bet against it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and we talked about the injury report with respect to a couple of other players, but LSU lost even more receivers than I knew. LSU was such a less talented team than Ole Miss coming into this game, and when I previewed this game, I said, look, there's no reason why LSU would win this game other than who Lane Kiffin is and what LSU is at night, and that's exactly what we got.
On a night in which Ole Miss was a road favorite against an AP top 15 team for the first time since the Jimmy Carter administration, because of course. Why not? When I saw that note I was watching SEC final, and I saw that when they lead into the game, and I see the year, my mind just operates in presidential administrations of when it happened.
You get it. Yep.
So that was obvious. But LSU looked like the more playoff worthy team down the stretch, at least with the way that it executed it, and LSU forced Ole Miss to implode. Let's start with the LSU side first.
So hold on, let me stop you right there, because you texted me after this. I love writer perspective on things, But just because one team beats another team does not mean that they switch playoff poll. Like LSU is not a good team. We did not watch a good team.
That's
We
why I
did
said
not
down the
watch a playoff
stretch.
team.
That's why
I
I
don't
said
even
down
think
the
that's
stretch.
the case. I think we watched Ole Miss implode. So I don't want all these expectations to now come onto LSU as if LSU slayed this dragon. This is a Lane Kiffin team. This is not a special team. This team just lost to Kentucky.
Okay. Yeah. And look, that's a very measured take. That's a very measured take because I think if you look at the way that things played out and you say like, oh, LSU's got some juju now. This is a team that's really feeling a lot more confident. And I think you see that response from Nussmeier and you go, that guy could be playing in a 12-team playoff. Like he did not have a good day from start to finish. But Ole Miss, I thought, did everything it set out to do up front early on. And without any real run game to speak of, we talked about how Ole Miss, there's a really good chance they were going to take that away from LSU. And sure enough, they did. But
like taking candy from a baby, other way, getting LSU's run game out of the game plan. Just go ahead. And, you can have it. You can have it. We'll give it to you.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss would do that to the vast majority of teams, but even that LSU matchup set up well for Ole Miss to be able to win that battle up front. But like how locked in Nuss was down the stretch was everything. I mean, it's everything. The fourth down conversion to Mason Taylor, when I thought was that was the moment when I thought he's dialed in. He looks like a guy that's about to go win this football game. But the touchdown pass to Aaron Anderson, in real time, it looked special. When you saw the replay and you realized the anticipation that he threw that football and the trust that he had in a former Bama transfer to step up in that spot, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable in that spot. Well, when you make your case that Nuss is QB1 in the 2025 draft class, which TBD on that, I think he's done a lot of things really well to improve that draft stock, and things can go haywire. Like this is obviously really early in the conversation. But when you make that case, that throw will be, see, guys, this is why he can do this stuff at the next level. That plays.
Exactly. I mean, the thing about Nussmeier is, and I joked about this with you, he's locked in a prison, right? This offense does not work functionally, right? And he has these receivers that are hurt. When you watch the bad decisions he makes, guys are not open. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, he can make these big plays down the stretch. And if you put him around a good group of talent, if you put him around a schemer that makes things a little bit easier for him, this dude was chucking the ball down the field over and over and over again, hoping he could connect. And I mean, it turned into some picks. It turned into some bad throws. But what you see in those moments, when you see you got that dog in him, and I often joke about this with you, you know, it matters in sports. Are you that guy? Do you have that dog in them? Again, on the sideline, we saw one guy was not. In Nussmeier's eyes, you look him in the eyes and you go, that's a winner. You know, so I don't know. It's so difficult to watch Nussmeier tape and pick what he is.
Was it right before the Aaron Anderson throw that he got behind center and he like jumps up to hype himself up?
Yep.
And I'm like, that dude's feeling good right now. He's not feeling the weight of these expectations. And that is a guy that is really comfortable in this moment when he really doesn't have a whole lot of experience in that moment. That was a great sign for me. Body language was favorable for one quarterback and not so much the other.
Well, you know what's funny, too, is that he's actually weirdly been in a good amount of these moments because Brian Kelly keeps putting him in these situations. You know, you go in the Georgia game right after Jaden Daniels goes down, and it's like, what am I going to do? Go beat Georgia? He just continues to fight himself for these. Jaden Daniels goes down in the Mizzou game. It's like, oh no, what do I do? So it's like Brian Kelly has jump scared him into being fearless.
But the Georgia game, that game was Georgia, he made plays in the second half of that game, and that we talked about it right after the 2022 SEC championship. What's Nussmeier's future? What does all this look like? And the intrigue was
the Arkansas game with Coach O, where he started him randomly. It's like his whole career at LSU has just been like, why is this guy in? This is unsurmountable odds for him.
Did he start that game?
He started a random game under Coach O. I'm pretty sure it was Arkansas.
I thought his first career start was the bowl game.
I think Johnson came in and then he did a series. So in my mind, it was a start. But a great example. He's been so weirdly managed that it's not like he got a clean break like most quarterbacks, which buddy, this is your team. This is your year. It's like, no, he's always kind of been fighting for his life out there.
Yeah. Speaking of that Arkansas game, the last LSU loss at night was Arkansas 2021. Brian Kelly still undefeated. By the way, KJ, the quarterback that night, just in case people forgot, he was
Pour one out.
He was great at one point. I swear he was. I fell in love with him for a reason. Um, but that's significant. And it's significant for an LSU team that, once again, took it on the chin opening weekend because of a loss on Sunday. And as you said, if there's anybody that's well-versed to respond from that, it is Brian Kelly, who did not have, by any stretch of the imagination, this perfect game plan to frustrate Ole Miss. Did he have the horses in on the offensive side of the ball for the majority of this game? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say this was a game in which Joe Sloan felt particularly good about his play calling. Although the last play at the end, where you're able to get Lacey matched up, not on Amos and instead on a much younger corner. I can't remember who the corner was, but I thought McElroy did a really good job of pointing that out about how they got him in motion. Nuss sees the matchup that they like, and then boom, you can take advantage of that with a double move. Like, if you're setting yourself up to at least be in those spots down the stretch, and then just say, does our guy have it or does our guy not? Sometimes that's all you can ask for. And maybe this year as a whole is one of those years in which that's all as a fan you can really ask of your team. Do you feel good about your team executing plays down the stretch? Because so many of these games are going to be a lot closer than we're predicting. And I think we're finally getting to a place mid-season where we're accepting that reality. We're still going to criticize the flaws, and we're going to get to it with Georgia and Bama, obviously, and kind of the way that it's played out. But I hate to just be like, well, everybody can play with everybody. But the difference sometimes is what you saw from LSU in the final moments of those games, a game in which they could have very, very easily lost at several different points.
Yeah, I mean, it's freeing to a degree to be able to look at your team and say, hey, we just lost Jaden Daniels. Don't think this is a playoff team. And for my assertion, I thought it would be the defense. And boy, was I wrong. I mean,
6 sacks. 6 sacks in this game, Will.
Oh, yes. I mean, that Blake Baker defense, mind you, again, with no Harold Perkins, 6 sacks, career high for Jackson Dart. He looked lost the whole game. The offense, again, was out of sorts. But the cool thing about this is you can kind of step back and say, okay, let's really fairly evaluate everything because I don't have as much skin in the game. And I don't know. I mean, that's what was so interesting about LSU is that while the offense is a little bit of a mystery box that you never know what you're going to get, man, this defense stepped up. And one more thing I'll say, I could probably fit this in later, but we can go a ton of ways with this game. Weirdly, I found myself feeling like this was a recruiting versus transfer portal game.
Let's get to the Ole Miss part in a second.
Let's do the Ole Miss part.
Yeah. Let's because you're right. Like the defense itself, that's why you spend on a guy like Blake Baker to transform your defense schematically. A guy that has a clue, a guy that's not just gonna be like, yeah, you know what, I need to get my guys in here to kind of figure things out. No, he's gonna have weeks out there blowing dudes up and being all over the place, left and right, and you're gonna find these guys. And I don't know that they have what you would call the swamp monsters on that defense, but they have enough of these guys where they're not a total doormat. Swinson's great. Swinson's awesome.
One of those guys. Yep.
Yeah, he is turning into a swamp monster. You're right. He might, if he's not a swamp monster yet, he's swamp monster adjacent.
How about both of Perkins' old numbers? 4 and 40 making the impact, right?
Suntaran Perkins. I think I'm saying that. McDonough had the pronunciation correct. I think I butchered that one. But yeah, Perkins, number 4 in Death Valley, who was making plays, and it wasn't Harold. Look, I think that you look at the way that this could play out with LSU, and I know that it's anytime you win a big game in the 12-team playoff era, it's immediately we're going to jump to the playoff. But they won't be back at Death Valley for nearly a month. You got a night game at Arkansas and then at A&M, and what I'd assume will be a night game at Kyle Field because neither one of those teams have lost an SEC game yet, along with Texas. Those are the 3 teams in the SEC who are unbeaten in conference play as we are now at the midway point of the season. I think a tricky path still remains for LSU, especially if this is an LSU team that, look, we saw the flaws play out on Saturday night, even in a winning effort. But if you got a quarterback like Nuss, and if you've got a defense that at least has a clue, you've got a chance. Will, are you willing to switch at all with the playoff conversation? Like if you're betting today, you still think that LSU misses the playoff?
Yeah. If every game was against Lane Kiffin.
All right, let's go.
If every game was at night, we might make the playoffs.
True. I agree.
I'm serious. I think this is my opinion.
Ole Miss. Lane. This is why you can't have nice things. Big boy programs win games like that. They don't leave all those points on the board early and then fall to 1-2 in SEC play. 5 red zone trips, 13 points. And that's not including the drop by my guy, Trey Harris, on that long play early where that's in the breadbasket and he knew it. And that felt significant not to be able to come down with that. I don't know how much that changes the overall day for Jackson Dart.
I mean, it's a million things, right? It's a million plays in a row that if Ole Miss had even one of them, totally different game.
4th down conversion in the red zone, the missed field goal early. And by the way, Trey Harris leaves this game with an injury, not until he at least mossed Major Burns in the end zone. Seeing him in street close down the stretch was a bummer. I don't think you can just say Jackson Dart's play was reflective of that. I think you can look at that Ole Miss defense.
But that's an MVP conversation. That only adds to the conversation around your guy Trey Harris. When he goes down and suddenly Jackson Dart's like,
Trey Harris best player on that team. Trey Harris, Walter Nolan, Trey Harris. They might have, as crazy as this sounds, Will, Ole Miss might have the best individual player on offense and defense in the SEC. I don't think that's that crazy for Walter Nolan. And I was the Walter Nolan is overrated guy. He has been so freaking good.
Kennard would like to have a word with you after
Kyle Kennard's up there. Yep. Kyle Kennard, SEC defensive. Yeah. SEC defensive player of the year is going to be fascinating this year. But like you could at least kind of make that argument. Those two guys are in the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
You have the stars if you're Ole Miss. And I think you could still look at that defense and go, man, I don't think this is just the Ole Miss defense of old. I think Kiffin has the defense that he wants. I don't think this is a blame Pete Golden game. You could say, yeah, they didn't make the plays down the stretch, but man, one or two plays that you want back on the final drive. We talked about the throwing window that Nuss had where that's really good coverage. And yeah, the favorable matchup that you get the corner on the play for Lacey that walks it off. But here's what I want to know. And this is the point that I know you're getting to here. What was the communication between Lane and Jackson Dart in the final 5 minutes of that football game? I get Ole Miss's offensive line.
For signal?
Maybe. Were they talking to one another? Because if you're the elite offensive mind, the quarterback guru, if you're that guy, you're calming your guy down at some point, and you can't just say, well, our offensive line was a total liability. Offensive line is a huge issue. It's the single worst unit for Ole Miss this year, and it's not particularly close. It's really not. But Jackson Dart navigated that last week at South Carolina. I'm not saying South Carolina and Death Valley at night are the same exact thing, but and again, like
look like it to us, buddy.
I mean, but it did.
That is a great environment. I'm not going to jump on those guys.
Oh yeah, for LSU, definitely. Yeah. But why did it feel like he couldn't do anything besides take hits down the stretch? Like he was, no matter what he was going to do, nothing on the Ole Miss script was going to be good. Nothing that Charlie Weiss Jr. was going to dial up was going to work. Was this just a team that wasn't ready for a stage like that? This is a bad game for the Lane Kiffin will win the big one day argument. Because you're right, Will. Like Lane turtled down the stretch, and his guy was not where he needed to be as a third-year starter in that offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to compare Lane Kiffin to himself and Dan Mullen, and I'll say, like, he didn't lose his cool on the sidelines. I'll give him credit for that. Because we used to see him blow up on Jackson Dart. We used to see him have the histrionics, have all that type of stuff. He at least, like, when you
past
start
that, yeah, he's past
right.
that.
If you start at a place where you're having the histrionics and you go to 0, that's improvement. Now 0 enough to win the SEC championship. No.
I don't know what happened to the 2022 version of Juice Wells, but that Ole Miss team could have used that guy on the football field on Saturday night.
He's juiceless.
He is juiceless, Will. He is.
If you're juiceless, you're useless.
You kind of are. That's a little bit of a shot at the dog. Oh, that is the Josh Heupel quote.
Yeah.
Oh, good point. They needed that guy. That if 2022 Juice Wells shows up post Trey Harris injury, Ole Miss at least has a chance down the stretch. But man, like that's just been a frustrating, splashy acquisition. And I know that he's had his moments, right? Like I complimented the catch that he made against Wake Forest. That was kind of like the final dagger of that game. And like you look at the numbers, like, all right, that's a complimentary guy. This was a guy that coming into last year, Will, we're saying who's the best receiver in the SEC? Is it Juice Wells or Malik Neighbors? All right. And Malik Neighbors has transcended into a guy that, look, even as a guy that was high on him, and I said I still like Neighbors better than Juice Wells, that was a conversation we were having. And for Juice Wells to not be that guy where, like, he had a drop early as well, like he's not getting the separation that he needs to, that just is such a bummer for the foundation of how you're going to build this team. Because you've had portal hits, big time portal hits, and you're not staying in that game without that defensive line. I'll continue to say that. But man, it's really hard to look in the mirror and realize how that played out for your team with everything we've been saying about the pieces that you've added.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to clarify there too, I mean, the defensive line had 0 sacks.
They did not sack Nuss once, did they?
Not once.
I felt like they actually They
pressured him a decent amount.
Yeah, they got pressure on him, and they moved the pocket back. And there were some of these plays that they make in the run game where you're just like, golly, how do you stick one person on Pegues or Nolan, man? And I know Pegues front of the program, but like, golly, those guys get after it. But Nuss
I thought, that
well.
fumble was an act of God. I mean, a split second later, that is a fumble by Pegues on Nussmeier. So yeah, I think it's tough because like I want to credit the D line, but at the end of the day, there are many plays to be had, and the flustered plays that Nuss made weren't because of pressure; they were because of Nuss just somebody down there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean there were times in this game where it felt like Nuss and Dart were trading off. Let me backpedal and throw it into a sea of people and just pray that someone comes down to it. There were a lot of moments like that in this game where it just was not happening on the back end. But yeah, I'm sticking a fork in Ole Miss's playoff path, and I realize.
Yeah, hey, real quick though, this is where I can make the point about the portal, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Please fire away.
So we were told over and over again, okay, Brian Kelly's cheap. He didn't want to pay. How did Dominic Williams do yesterday?
Dominic Williams did. I thought he's actually been all right in the first part.
Was it worth
$1
million? Did he prevent Texas from cooking them?
No, it was the difference that Texas.
No, that $1 million was not well spent. Okay, let's just put it that way. So at the end of the day, on one side of the game, you have Juice Wells, Jackson Dart, a transfer, Pegues, a transfer, Princely, Walter Nolan. On the other side of the ball, you have Brian Kelly with this long plan. Okay, now you could talk about the plan didn't work. Okay, we're talking about Matt House is the reason why Brian Kelly's not 3-0 against Lane Kiffin. For sure. Like, I agree with that. But he pivoted, okay? You look at these offensive tackles for LSU, and you look at the offensive line for Ole Miss, that's the ballgame. It's that simple. 6 sacks versus 0, okay? Brian Kelly came in, and he started 2 freshman tackles. He let them develop. He didn't get greedy. He didn't say, hey, I need to go to Taco Bell and go get my fix right now. I got to put this in the crock pot. He said, I got to make myself a meal. I got to make myself a real SEC football team.
You big crock pot guy? Well, what do you do more, crock pot or Taco
Bell? Me personally, I guess neither, but probably crock pot if I had to pick one.
It's the correct answer.
Yeah, I'm a HelloFresh guy.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hit us up. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's the thing is that we heard over and over again, Lane Miss. It's like Tim Apple. Lane Kiffin is the cool guy, right? He has the dunker. He has the backboard, which, well, they blew a dunk in this game too. That didn't
Trey Harris had a tough missed dunk in this one. Yeah, not good for your boy in his Heisman campaign. I was hoping to add that to the Heisman reel. But
listen, I'm telling you, MVPs matter when you sit down, all right? That guy was a difference maker, right? So point being, he's got the dog. He's got his son. He's got the transfers. He's got the cool videos. What won this game? Beef. At the end of the day, LSU can't run the football. LSU couldn't run the football against Hoover. All right. That's just how it is. They're running the T at the goal line. Your quarterback shouldn't have.
Sorry to interrupt you. Does Hoover still have Repeat Smith? Is he still
No, and
eligible?
Hoover has befallen bad times. Maybe they could run the ball at Hoover. Against IMG Academy, they couldn't run the ball.
Gotcha. All right, that's a deep cut for the people. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying, because they could run the ball against Hoover right now. Yeah. But point being, you see all these flashy players that people know their names, they have a ton of Instagram followers, and you see the players that, actually won this game. Aaron Anderson, Nick Saban walking up to him bedtime. Hey, you get more snaps here. Still feel that way? I think at the end of the day, the guys that Brian Kelly brought won this game. And, you could talk about the couple of transfer portal additions. Zy Alexander, Nicholls State. What a king. Guy that can't stay healthy, but when he's healthy,
he's good.
My goodness.
He's a good player,
right? Man. And that's the thing at the end of the day, this whole strategy, everybody wants to jump on, we only recruit Louisiana, da-da-da. This team has a culture, okay? Mercenaries do not care if the ship goes down. They're looking for the life raft. That's what Ole Miss had on the field in Tiger Stadium. They had a coach with 1 foot out the door, looking at Florida, and they had a bunch of players who came from wherever.
I don't know that we can assume that unless we can play the results if he takes the Florida job.
I was here for 2022, and that's why I predicted this game the way I did, and watch Ole Miss the season goes for me.
Yeah, Ole Miss playoff path is done. as far as I'm concerned. Because
now he's going to start pouting. He hadn't started pouting yet. Like I said, he was at 0. Okay.
The statement with the faking injuries, the 29 stoppages that Ole Miss has had, what was it, 29 stoppages in the last
now 30 with the ones in this game factored in. But
I think they only had the one in this game, though. Coincidentally. Yeah, go figure that number went way down. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like everyone dumped on Brian Kelly for, bargain bin shopping and all this different stuff. And I think this is really a proof of concept for the way that Brian Kelly is trying to build this team. When you look at a team like Texas, you go, this is a team that, hey, if I could have one of these players, Dominic Williams or Colin Farrell, I'll take Colin Farrell, the freshman from Texas I talked about.
Colin Farrell's you're thinking Colin Simmons.
Sorry. Colin Farrell's an actor. Good job, bro.
An actor, an Irish actor. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what?
Where are we going with this one? Yeah.
Colin Simmons.
Okay.
Matthew McConaughey could have been playing wide receiver for LSU yesterday. Anyway, so point being, Colin Simmons, the freshman for Texas, I would have taken him. And so that's kind of where I'm at here. I understand the transfer portal is a big deal, but at the end of the day, we really saw that the old school way in college football is still the way, right? And when you look at the teams that have been there recently, Michigan, Washington, we talked about that team that developed its people under DeBoer. Alabama has even done that. They got there last year. Those 4 teams last year were built, not bought teams. And the teams that have struggled yesterday, Ohio State, right? All these transfers coming in. Ross Bjork, same deal.
Oregon's loaded with transfers. Look at Dylan Gabriel and Evan Stewart making big time plays in that game. Jordan Birch was.
I'm talking about the all in win now mentality that has taken over college football. It reminds me of the NBA. I said this at the time. These super teams that are coming together, they're facing the same issues that LeBron did when he came to Miami. It's communication. It's guys not having culture. It's guys not knowing each other, not knowing each other's middle names and birthdays, and being friends and playing hard for each other and digging in when it matters. So I think we saw a ton of that in Tiger Stadium. I think we saw the same Lane Kiffin we've always seen. I've never backed off of that. And we saw a group of players that were unable to come together and overcome that.
Counterpoint to your transfer portal hate. Mm-hmm. Diego Pavia.
Listen, if you import the entire state of New Mexico, we have seen that strategy work. I recommend it, to be honest. If you could find a random Western state, maybe we'll try Arizona. Get that one going. Work for LSU with Jaden Daniels. Maybe you just take a Western state. You just take their entire coaching staff 1-0 for that.
In Nevada, I heard they've got some. UNLV's got some big time NIL issues. Give the state of Nevada a call. Hey, you got Bishop Gorman? Yeah, you got Bishop Gorman over there. Just poach. That's the strategy for the portal. You have to take an entire state. You can't just be like, oh, we're going to pick and choose here and there. I do think the portal is elevating the floor of a lot of teams. I think it speaks to the parity of the SEC. But
I'm pro portal. And LSU should have got more guys in the portal. I'm not saying the portal is bad. Yeah. I'm not being a boomer. I'm just saying that the guys that win the offseason, we're seeing more and more, are not the guys that win the regular season. We saw that with Michigan last year.
Norvell is the case in point of your argument for sure. Of you can have great success, but it just doesn't guarantee year to year. And we can talk about the splashy additions all we want, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee anything that those guys are going to gel. I agree with that. It's a fair point. All right. Yeah. Sorry, Ole Miss. I think the playoff path is dead because I don't think you're running the table. I get that you could still get into the playoff at 10-2, and Ole Miss would get into the playoff at 10-2, but I don't think the way that this team has started SEC play, it's a team that I think can go 5-0 with the rest of the schedule. Even if I do think Georgia might be more vulnerable than they've been in the previous 7 years of the Kirby Smart era, but I don't think Ole Miss is built for that this year, and I think that is a really, really tough pill to swallow. You mentioned Florida before. I don't think Lane Kiffin was taking that Florida job if Ole Miss was in the playoff because the timing of that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be a topic of discussion. It's just going to be, and we'll have more thoughts on that if the situation presents itself.
And that will just put a pin on it here because I've said it before. If you want a guy to rebuild your bombed out roster from all these coaches you blamed, don't get the guy who can't recruit high school. That's all I'm going to say on that. Continue.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Florida, Tennessee. Let's talk about that Florida team. Two things I can't believe. Well, two things. One is that DJ Lagway made that throw to
He's so nice,
game.
Dude.
That throw was
so sick.
I don't remember what I audibly shouted at no one as that happened, but it was a thing of beauty. If you haven't seen the throw that DJ Lagway made to tie the game up, could have been to take the lead. We're going to get to that in a second.
One sec real quick, because there was a moment in this game too. They're backed up all the way in their own goal line. Tennessee had just punted to them, and you hear like this acoustic Rocky Top like rattling off the sides. Yep. And it's like, and you're like, oh my God, this kid is 18. He's in the literal Roman Coliseum. These guys are screaming. And I'm like, I would be going number 1, number 2. I would have figured out number 3.
Yep.
I would have invented something to be running down my leg. That kid is him.
The stadium pulse in college football 25 would have just been off the charts of that moment. And to make that throw in that spot to Chimere DK, the guy who was Graham Mertz's guy from Wisconsin. Yep. I mean, it was really tough sledding for Lagway to that point. And you could have looked at what he did really up to that throw and been like, yeah, true freshman, that atmosphere, he's coming in for Graham Mertz as, he takes over. It's not just the 2 quarterback rotation. We're going to get to the Mertz part of this in a second here. But I could not believe that he made that throw kind of off his wrong foot, 30 yards between 2 defenders, a little bit reminiscent of the throw he made in that spring game too. That was the throw that made me go, oh my God, this is going to be fun. That's exactly why people are already in love with DJ Lagway. Okay. And we can talk about the Nico part of this and the throws that he's made in the young part of his career and the throws that have made people fall in love with him. And that's not necessarily a linear process as we're seeing play out with him. But
talking about, being put in these bad situations, your quarterback goes down, Mertz is playing well, right? It's like, again, freshman, coach's job is on the line. You're at the number 8 team. Rocky Top is like rattling off. So I think given all of that,
I couldn't believe he made the throw.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that Billy kicked the extra point instead of going for 2. I couldn't believe it. Well, I just can't fathom that the plan was, let's see if this, I think it was a trick play that they were trying to show. And it was, what is Tennessee going to do to respond to this? Right. And if they give us the look that we want, we're going to stay out there. And then we're going to go for 2. And then I don't even know if we got a full look at it. It was almost like they were showing the sideline the entire time. There seemed to be some confusion there. And then when they called the timeout and Billy is like, send the kicker out there and he points to it, Bob Wischusen on the call is like stunned. And I was right there with him. They cut to
Bob Wischusen. He said, a smart man once told me scared money don't make money.
I don't think Bob said that, but he thought it. He definitely did. Look, here's the problem with that. And I know we play the results. I hate how many people play the results on Twitter with every 4th down, 2-point conversion call, every onside kick that doesn't work out. We do this way too much. And I get it. Brian Kelly made the same exact decision. But Brian Kelly was not one play away from pulling off an upset as a 2-touchdown dog in need of saving his job. So there were different circumstances for Billy Napier.
Well, you can make the argument too that Bama did the same thing, but they just kind of bet against the 2-point conversion, which there you go.
What do you mean Bama did the same thing?
So Bama also kicked the PAT when they could have put themselves ahead 2 scores.
Different because you're not trying to win. You're not trying to like go for
no.
Like,
I know,
lead, though.
But we're saying it's all different. That's all I'm saying is like everything is situational. But in this situation, I think you should do that.
The problem is that you could almost hear. You talk about like the audible crowd noise of Neyland, the Rocky Top just banging. Don't you think every single Tennessee fan from coast to coast, you could hear a collective exhale as Florida decides we're just going to kick the extra point to tie the game instead of keeping that offense on in the field? And Billy Napier, the play caller, the guy who said, no, fam, I got this. This is my offense. This is how I'm going to do this. I'm not going to bring in a play caller. He didn't have the look that he wanted, even though he's got the quarterback that he's always wanted. He can say all these nice things about Graham Mertz. DJ Lagway is the quarterback he's always wanted. And he was a play away from stunning a top 10 team on the road. Obviously, a team that Florida has had Tennessee's number for really the duration of the 21st century, okay? So, yeah, I couldn't believe that he did that. Absolutely stunned. And then, of course, Florida's offense sputters in OT. Couldn't even get a field goal. Tennessee plays big boy football. Dylan Sampson runs it in for the win.
It's inexplicable, right? Because at the end of the day, what we said in the preview was like, well, we think Tennessee's people are starting to figure out Tennessee, but like Travis Williams figuring you out is not, most people couldn't figure you out. They found a way to completely stop this offense. And Billy was put in the exact situation. Like when I've joked about Billy, it's like, well, he's overconfident. He's like anti-Lane Kiffin, where it's like he trusts himself too much. He's got, I feel like maybe if he had a couple more game changer coordinators, if he had a couple more voices in his ear on the sidelines, if his staff was like 5 or 6 people bigger, they would have had the analytics and told him, you know what I'm saying? But that's when your coach is his own head. because this is what Billy Napier was hired to do. Scared money don't make money is not a joke. That was his whole brand, is to go out there and win games like this in these moments, trust himself, be confident. And yeah, I mean, when guys start doing new stuff wrong, that's really interesting to me, because with Billy Napier has always been a guy who falls on his sword. He's always been a guy who trusts his decisions to the end of the day. There was no decision made here. It was just like a punt, basically.
And here's the thing. You had watched Lagway up until that ridiculous throw struggle. I don't know what his success rate was after he came in for Mertz and after he took over, but it wasn't particularly good. Tennessee's defense had kind of feasted on him. So if you're telling yourself, oh, well, let's just get this into overtime, and then I trust that we're going to be able to have a touchdown drive, and then we'll get that stop, I just disagree with that logic 100%. And I'm
going to trust my defense here. I'm a Billy Napier.
Oh, my God.
Okay, that's what you want to do, brother. Go for it.
And Florida's defense played well. They played really well. But that'll be the decision that haunts Billy Napier. It just there's no way around it. And like, you can almost live with this reality of going forward in that spot, not getting it. But it's almost as if he felt, oh man, it's all going to come down to this one play. And I don't have that one play that's in the bag that's ready to go. And I don't want this to define my day. I'm just going to kick the can. And that's scared money. That's scared money. It's easy for us to say that at home from time to time. But when you hear that entire 107,000, however many people were in that building, breathe that sigh of relief. You messed up. You did. And that sounds harsh, but it's true.
On the weather radar, when they saw the kicker coming out, there was like a little small gust above Dealin Stadium. It was like,
yep, it really did. All the flags were blowing right as that happened. Here's the thing, too. Remember when Florida had one of the worst run defenses in America and couldn't even stop Mississippi State with a backup quarterback who may not be like the great descendant of a president from 250 years ago? Remember that? Mm-hmm. At the time we brought this up, the next two games that Florida was going to play were against the two best non-service academy rushing attacks in the sport. Early in the season, but still, nothing said Florida is going to be able to stop the run against UCF. Nothing suggests that Florida is going to be able to stop the run against this Tennessee team in Knoxville. Florida actually had the rushing advantage in this game. 163 to 162 in the sack-adjusted rushing yards.
Montreal Johnson was cooking.
And he got hurt, which was a bummer. Yeah. It was a bummer, but he was looking really, really good. And all this was coming together. And you could picture like all these kind of blind faith that Billy has been assuring the collective public of, oh, it's going to come together. Like, that was happening. It was. Sampson had 112 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. That looks good on the final stat line. It was tough sledding for him. It really was. Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks in that Florida defensive line, like they really stepped up, I thought. And once again, here's the most important thing for Florida and this defense that I had totally written off a few weeks ago. Nico looked rattled. He looked rattled. So Florida, it did everything it set out to do. And it might not have set out to have an injury to Graham Mertz and Montreal Johnson Jr., of course, but it went into Rocky Top and it had Tennessee on the ropes. But there are no moral victories in rivalry games. There are none. There are no moral victories.
This gentleman was a 2-point conversion. I hate to just say we're on the same page. This was the story of the game because Florida played. Was this their best game under Billy Napier?
It's close to it. The Utah game, we're going to play the results with that. If Utah,
similar game, though.
Yeah, similar game. Similar game where it's just like it's one play here or there down the stretch.
And they made the play in that game. Like, I can visualize the play. And so, yeah, point being, I think he was about to play away from, like, maybe not an extension, keeping his job for another year, because you beat number 8 Tennessee, you're not getting fired.
You won 3 in a row. You will have won 3 in a row.
And you fix the defense. That's the most, like, this is so much funnier than I could have anticipated because I thought Florida was going to come apart at the seams. No, this team really wants to play for their coach, and they just don't. They're not good enough. Like against Mississippi State, they look lost. Against Miami, they look lost. And these last couple, they have looked like exactly what Billy promised, and it's just going to not end up mattering because at the end of the day, once your record is your record after 3 years at Florida, like, it just is what it is. You're supposed to be a better university competing with Alabama and Georgia, and you can't just have a coach who's like 2 games under 500 at the end of year 3.
And you're 3-3 now, despite the fact that you've shown this improvement. You really have. And we're recording this before knowing the severity of Graham Mertz's injury. Just gutted for that guy after really a non-contact injury. It was weird the way that it happened. You thought, oh, maybe somebody landed on him for something funny. He was like, no, he's just finishing the play, and he took an awkward step, and then he's limping over to the sideline. You're like, oh man, that is terrible. And I get the silver lining is you get to see DJ Lagway come in, but for a guy that, look, this was his last year of eligibility, TBD on what it looks like moving forward. He was on crutches, he had the brace, he was on the sideline. You could tell. I mean, he was.
I mean, a guy that's been a warrior too. I mean, he's played despite the horrors, as we say. He's played really well despite opening week against Miami. The big hit he took there, like he's been leaving it all on the field. And we talked about DJ Lagway, not really starting games for this team because of Billy's plan and not wanting to. Well, now it's like you guys are going to get Lagway. I mean, and I think Billy has managed that quarterback situation honestly pretty perfectly based on wanting to get Lagway some reps because they matter, obviously, right? Because here they are, but at the same time saying Graham Mertz is the better player, which I think we even saw last night. He has that composure and like he knows the playbook.
Graham Mertz would make that throw, but he wouldn't have struggled, I think, as much as Lagway did leading up to that moment.
Right, exactly. Like, and it's we're talking about fractions here. Like, obviously, Lagway is a more talented player and will be a better college football player. It's just you don't want an 18-year-old in the Coliseum ever. You just don't want that. So, point being, like, I think it's tough because we do get to see DJ Lagway, but it's at what like we never want to kind of get injured. It sucks because. At least now from Billy's standpoint, he can game plan with that guy and not have to do the timeshare to keep everybody happy. So projecting this team going forward is going to be fascinating because they're playing hard for that coach, man. I'm not lying. Like, I'm not joking. Like, it's just a heartbreaking loss, man.
But this is the tough thing. You're sitting there at 3-3 now. You've got conceivably a true freshman quarterback who's going to be starting for you for the foreseeable future. TBD on what that looks like. But next up, you've got a Kentucky team that Billy has yet to beat. Kentucky is in those matchups. Kentucky has been the team that Florida aspires to be, as hard as that is for Florida fans to hear that. And then you've got a bye week after that. You've got Georgia and Jacksonville. Then you're at Texas. And then an LSU team that you'll face. You get them at home, but you haven't beat them since 2018. And then Ole Miss. So even if Florida isn't a doormat, and even if they continue to play like they did Saturday night, are they going better than 2-3 in that stretch? That's why we talked about the schedule so much. You can't just be decent and navigate it and just be totally fine. And that's what's staring Florida in the face, because this wasn't part of the Tennessee game, was not part of this daunting 5-game stretch to end the season. That's the thing to keep coming back to. And I realize we're including Kentucky in it now. We're taking Florida State out of it, which feels appropriate in some ways and not appropriate in others, because obviously Kentucky can't win a game at home. We'll get to that in a bit. But when they're the team that's, look, Billy hasn't beat them yet, and they won 3 in a row against Florida. I just that is the tough pill to swallow for Florida.
Well, and again, I'm being so serious here. Like, I hope Montel Johnson's okay. Like, the thing about Montel Johnson is he's actually a perfect running back to have if you are in DJ Lagway's situation, which is he's a great blocker. He's a guy who knows the scheme. He's not going to take negative plays. He's not going to make dumb plays. So I hope he's listed as a lower body injury. You're a hockey fan. You know how that goes. That could be anything from he's walking around fine to his lower half is missing. Yeah. So we really have no idea what's wrong with him. But yeah, like, I really hope Montel Johnson's okay, because that actually changes this offense. And you have the veteran leader in there going, I've been here with Billy. I've been here with Billy for a couple of years. Like, all right, kid, we're going to get through this together, versus like they couldn't really run the football outside of him last night. So, yeah.
All right, Tennessee. It's first of all, it's awesome to win a game like that against a team that obviously has had your number. 17 of the last 19 years, you've been on the wrong end of that rivalry. Okay, and so
2 of the last 3 though. Hey,
that's true. 2 of the last 3. You're exactly right. It feels great to get that one when it felt like it was slipping away, and it felt like it could have been another one of those games. You're just like, when is this ever going to happen? And it feels good to have a defense that you can lean on. James Pierce Jr., man, that was, in my opinion, his best game of the season. Maybe the box score is not going to indicate it, but I love the awareness on that pivotal goal line fumble that he had of Mertz, to be able to punch it and then to be able to fall on it. And that was such a bang play, but that's what great players do. And I do think James Pierce Jr., even if his NFL draft stock is going to take a hit because people aren't like, oh my God, he doesn't have like 1 million sacks, what's going on? I just still think he is so awesome, and he just changes how your offense can operate. But for the second consecutive week, Tennessee was shut out in the first half. Josh Heupel had never been shut out in the first half before walking into Arkansas. And now
he's the scripted GOAT. We joked about it for 2 straight years. It was like the beginning of the game is perfect. After that, now it's like he doesn't even have that.
Georgia fans think they're getting off to slow starts. Buddy, Tennessee's not even getting first half points. All right. The dominance of the opening script is no longer, as you mentioned. Nico looks like he's playing scared. And it looks like there is something that has shaken his confidence. And maybe how much Oklahoma was winning those battles on the edges, maybe that messed up his mental clock. I don't know. But that interception was terrible. Just stared down a receiver, did not see the guy in coverage, predetermined read, the type of thing that you thought, even, yes, he's young, he's extremely young, but you did not expect to see those types of moments where you're just like, dude, what are you looking at? You're supposed to be the guy that's calm, that's getting protection, that's going through his reads, and this isn't too much for you. But, man, those high percentage looks really were not there for him because Florida basically was
He
like,
needs to just say his own last name, kind of like the Goose Fraba thing, just Iama Leava. What is it? They're just taking for
Leava. Breathe the sigh of relief as he's saying his last name, just like Tennessee fans breathe the sigh of relief as Billy decides to go for a field goal and extra point instead of 2-point conversion. I don't think you could just chalk it up to receivers being banged up. Squirrel White, Brew McCoy, they were playing probably not at 100%. This Nico stuff is not just that. He looks rattled. And it's not ideal because I thought this was a favorable matchup. But if there's a takeaway from the first half of the season, maybe it's just that work through your stuff week to week, find a way to win. Don't worry about style points in this era of college football. Just find a way and hope that your guy is not going to go through these droughts. And Heupel was able to win this football game. He did. He leaned on the running game. They had the right offensive game plan down the stretch. But now you've got 3 wins against rivals with a chance to get number 4 next week with Alabama coming to town. Can Alabama's defense, can it be the get right for Nico?
Buddy, after this week and last week, Swarm defense is going to be taken off on Twitter again. People are going to be drinking the Kool-Aid. I can't wait. Yeah, man, to be honest with you, I have watched more like just unbiased raw feed tape of this Tennessee team than any other team in history outside of maybe 2019 LSU when I get sad.
That's biased. That's biased tape.
What?
Unbiased
tape. Well, it's beautiful. That's the thing. It's beautiful. It looks like art being painted in front of you. I am so confused. I got Falcons fans upset, so I don't know what's going on. Honking their horns. Anyway, it's almost Kirk time. Anyway, so point being, I've watched more like tape of this team because they came out. I said NC State was this huge win. That looks stupid. It's crazy because there are lots of things that I've talked about keyed in on, but I'll hand up. I didn't see this coming out of Tennessee, and I don't even know enough at this point to understand exactly what's going on. I think the Nico part of it's a huge part of it. I think that, we talked about his ability to be smooth and calm and collected. The Nico we ordered is not the Nico we received. We got the wish Nico. I don't know what's going on. We got, we thought it would be a guy who could use his legs, who could be calm under pressure. If you're Tennessee, you're honestly getting a little worried that this offense is getting figured out. You're getting worried this offense is a little bit too, I don't know a better word than high school.
Don't say that. I wouldn't go that far.
When you talk about the reads and the responsibility that Nico has, that's what I'm talking about. When it comes to, okay, if you look at, is this guy going to be Hendon Hooker or is this guy going to be Joe Milton? Unfortunately, we've seen a lot more of that second guy. And it's not, those are 2 very different players, and we thought we were going to get Hendon Hooker with a guy that if the 1 or the 2 reads in the offense aren't there, he can take off, he can make a decision, he can do something, or at least just like get the ball out. We've seen a guy who starts to panic, and that's the opposite of what Nico is billed as. So my official take is I need to go watch more because I don't understand what I'm watching with Tennessee. I don't want to say that they're buried or anything. Like I said, when Travis Williams figures you out, hand up. Like I said, Alabama should have hired that guy. That's a genius. When I don't even know what to credit this to. Who figured him out?
Well, I think I would go back to the Oklahoma game if we're trying to get who figured Nico out. But you bring up our SEC defense is figuring out what Heupel's doing. 5 of the last 6 games against SEC competition dating back to last year, Tennessee's been held to 25 points or less. The one game that they didn't, Vandy, last year, with the defense down the stretch that did not have the bodies. I don't even think they had CJ Taylor.
New Mexico hadn't arrived yet. That doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly. Very different Vandy team than what we're talking about.
The wagons had not showed up from the trail to give the reinforcements.
But man, that's the issue. That's the issue with Tennessee is you're seeing these SEC defenses that look like they're one step ahead. And that is a problem that Josh Heupel needs to get figured out. Otherwise, you're not going to capitalize with this elite defense, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of this generational talents, at least the way that we were talking about, Nico. They have issues to figure out, but it's good to figure out those issues after a win against Florida. I bounce back of sorts, but not necessarily the bounce back that Tennessee fans are probably hoping for, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I think just to like put a bow on all that, like when I say high school, I'm talking about the amount of responsibility the quarterback has. And we've seen, the Ewers, Nussmeier, what we saw last night, these quarterbacks in college football, with Oregon, right? These quarterbacks in college football, they have the ability to take control of the game, make decisions, change things with what they see on the fly. That is kind of the new wave. And the old style, it used to be you had your pro style offense where the coach was in the quarterback's head the whole time. And then you had the spread offense, which is a lot more basic when you think about the reads because guys are a lot more open because people weren't used to defending it. We're seeing something that's very different from everyone else at Tennessee. We're seeing an offense that doesn't really trust its quarterback, and the quarterback has not done much to give you that. So I'm not even sure that it's the wrong decision. So that's kind of where I'm going is like, I'm not exactly saying Tennessee's cooked. I'm not exactly saying they've been exposed. Maybe this offense can work if we get a different Nico. But unfortunately, like we were talking about, again, I would love to give Florida the credit and say maybe the assistant to the assistant defensive coordinator got this figured out. But this Tennessee schedule, and we'll get on after this, said to be one of the funniest things possible, which is at Alabama, which is stoppable force.
Home against Alabama, not
sorry.
Alabama.
Sorry, not at. Why did I even say at? I'm looking at it right now. Thank you. Which is versus Alabama next week, which is stoppable for force versus movable object, right? Him versus Kane Womack. Then we have Kentucky at home. Not where you want to play Kentucky.
Heupel has owned Stoops, though. Heupel is
true.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying, this year you just rather get Kentucky on the road. Then Mississippi State, which not even good. They've had some weird, like underratedly weird team. Everything else is so weird, but Mississippi State's been super weird. At Georgia, unfortunately, we kind of know how that's gone. And at Vanderbilt. Now, we have a quarterback.
That's the thing, though. Who knows?
That's what I'm saying. Right now is the line of demarcation. Because if you're Tennessee, you're 4-1. That's really good. Your playoff hopes are alive. You're a top 10 team. You could really logically make it in this playoff, but you need to beat some really good teams, and you need to very quickly figure yourself out. And UTEP is second to last, buddy. Once you get there, you already know the story of your season. Like, I don't think we're going to be a Diego Pavia game away from this being a good team, a la a couple of years ago when Tennessee kind of imploded down the stretch. I think it's going to be like we're going to know who Tennessee is after a week, maybe two, certainly Georgia, and they have about a week to figure it out. So we're going to be dialed into that.
It's better to figure it out with somebody that's immensely talented and with one loss. That's the good news. That's the good news.
It's all ahead of them.
It is, very much. All right, Red River. Let's talk, Will. Please. Apologies for not getting to this until 52 minutes into the pod, wherever we are.
Insane games, dude. This is the new SEC. I think it's just like this every week, dog. Y'all just lock in.
It is. And to be fair, we're not discounting the importance of this game. We're discounting the entertainment value down the stretch of this one, despite the fact that, like I said before, I thought this was still really entertaining to see all the things that Texas did well. No disrespect to Oregon and the job that Dan Lanning did to beat Ohio State, finally win one of those games, the type of game that you felt like it's just always Dan Lanning's going to do something down the stretch to kind of mess it up, a la early Kirby in his career. What Lanning has done struggling against Kalen DeBoer, he finally wins one of those types of games. And Oregon's on the right side of that. There will be a lot of people saying, oh, Oregon, national championship conversation. Maybe they make the argument that they're the number one team in the country. No disrespect to that. But this one-sided rivalry showed exactly why I think Texas is the best team in the country, even if I think Oklahoma has major offensive issues. And that includes coaching, because Sark was in his bag. I mean, in his bag in this one. Score didn't really reflect that early on because Ewers came out looking, I don't know if you want to call it rusty. I don't know if you want to call it rattled. He was not effective, and he was not the dude early on who showed up and took the entire state of Michigan by the throat and said, I am the captain now. He sails that through.
Rough day for offensive gurus, right? Lane Kiffin, Billy Napier, Ryan Day. Sark is kind of that guy right now. I don't know who else you look at college football and say that guy's an offensive. Maybe I'm missing someone. Like, are we missing someone?
You could.
Heupel.
I mean, Heupel is certainly in that conversation. Like,
no. I mean, like, he's kind of getting like pushed out the door the way the other guys are. Like, there's only one guy at the top of the mountain that's like, I feel like he can scheme his way out of everything.
Sark did scheme his way out of that slow start.
Yeah, he sure did. Like, that guy feels at another level as a play caller. Like, that's kind of what I'm saying is like that was the in vogue thing as the hire, like the offensive guru for a while. He's kind of the last guy left right now.
Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan are going to be part of that conversation, although Saturday did not exactly it did not exactly bring a ton of confidence. But Sark, I agree. Like, I think Sark is on his own level at this point, because early on, Ewers comes out, and that throw that he had to Isaiah Bond, where he just sails it wide open, Isaiah Bond, and Billy Bowman picks it off. First series, deja vu for Ewers. He had the bad pick on the first series in this game last year. But Sark was just scheming these dudes open. And eventually we saw Ewers settle in. I thought the throw that kind of settled him in was the DeAndre Moore throw that he hits down the sideline. It's kind of a nice, like, Ewers off-platform throw where you're like, is he throwing it out of bounds? No, he's actually got a guy downfield, and it's a nice toe-tapping grab on the sideline. And if there were any people early on, because there absolutely were, but for the people early on in this football game who said Arch would be doing better, Arch would be up 21-3 right now, the sequence at the end of the first half should have just put the kibosh on that in every way. 3 minutes left in the first half. Texas is up 7-3. It's 3rd and 6 deep in their own territory. If they don't convert, they don't find the right answers, Ewers takes a sack, they're punting the football back. Oklahoma's got a chance to go down the field, maybe take the lead. I think Oklahoma would have gotten the ball to start the second half. Venables sends a corner blitz. If Ewers is out of sorts, if he's rattled, we just talked about how Nico felt rattled. Like, he's just not seeing the field well the way that he did early in the season. But if he's rattled, he doesn't see it, and he panics, and maybe Oklahoma does get the ball back with favorable field position in that spot. But Ewers recognizes the corner blitz. He sees that Ryan Wingo, the freshman, is going to be operating in that space that's occupying the blitz. Hits him in stride, 44 yards, gets the offense going, kind of flips the field at the very least. And then the very next play, Trey Wisner. He looks like he's about to run it in for a touchdown to set up a goal line situation at the very, very least. But he fumbles, it goes into the end zone, and Silas Bolden, the Texas receiver, makes such a heads-up play and recovers that football in the end zone, not even like ball still rattling around as he's going out of bounds, and it would have been a touchback for Oklahoma, who would have taken over. When that happened, and you could say, like, oh, was he just running down there to celebrate? I don't care. Texas has fun. If Silas Bolden's running down there to celebrate, that's a win too.
Good.
As far as I'm
celebrate
concerned.
More than if you're him. We're playing the results here. It worked out, all right?
Yeah, it worked out. But when that happened, every Oklahoma fan, you knew.
Listen, that's
Texas
the thing.
Day.
Celebrating with the boys is always good. That's the lesson that this tells. You see your boy get a new job, fly down there, congratulate him. You might meet the love of your life. You might hit the lottery ticket. Go ahead, do it. Keep the juices going, guys.
Yeah, I don't care if Silas Bolden, if he's just running down there to celebrate, that is a win. Maybe he's doing some.
He was the best man for that touchdown.
He was. You know what? He delivered a half-drunk speech. It went a little bit long. He got a little bit repetitive at the end, but it was still really, really good. Message sent. That's all that matters. That's what winning football teams do. It is. I always praised when Georgia has been at its peak. I've always loved how much their receivers care about blocking and doing those little things on the outside that makes them such a force that is so hard to slow down over the course of 60 minutes. Texas does stuff like that. And they genuinely, like, you see the way that they celebrate. It was T-Bob who tweeted, like, vibes couldn't be higher for Texas. They really could not be higher. And Oklahoma, you had to sit there and watch that happen. And you knew it was over on that play. You did. You very much did. Oklahoma didn't have a chance against that Texas defense. None. Who, by the way, Texas's defense is about to be like number one in the country in a lot of categories.
Okay? Our boy, we're going to keep calling him PK, I think.
Yeah, PK.
I think we'll keep calling him PK. I've heard Sark do it. But that was kind of like what I said in the preview. It's like, this is the PK game. Like, this is an offense that we all have heard about the offense, but the offense has at times not been super consistent, like we've talked about it. And to your point about Trey, his name's Trey Wisner, right?
Wisner, yep.
Look, guys, I've been real with y'all. I can't remember 5 Texas running backs, okay? That's the number we're on right now.
It doesn't matter. You forget that they don't have those guys. It's amazing.
It doesn't matter. Like, I hate to say I was wrong about that, but it's like at some level, it's just if you just get enough 4 or 5-star guys, someone's just going to emerge at the top of this thing you got going on. So, yeah, I mean, no, this was a statement game for him. And, like, that's the thing about Oklahoma. And I don't want to, like, jump on your point, but Oklahoma is a team that their offense was fatally flawed. Right. And we saw it from the beginning. Their defense is fine, but I don't think they have like a Georgia level defense or like a classic like level defense where it's like, oh, this team is going to get in there and win like a 14-10 game.
Agreed.
Whereas if your offense starts sputtering, again, guys, I watch Les Miles. I know what happens when your offense sputters and you have a pretty good defense. After a while, they start to get tired. And when this defense got tired, it was not good. And like to your point, the Billy Bowman play, out of this world sick. Unfortunately, this offense is going to give some guys some pretty bad tape at the next level because they're just on the field the whole game. And when you're on the field against Quinn Ewers and whichever running back they decide to do and whatever receivers are out there blocking and the 5-star, the big tackles they got, like it's just you don't want to hang out with Texas on offense. You want to get them off the field and get away from them. And they couldn't do that.
And if you can't capitalize early, forget about it. They had those short fields. They had the opportunities. And I thought Oklahoma was doing some things well early on. But, man, it was a tough go for that Oklahoma offense against Texas's defense. And I realize they're so depleted at receiver that they're relying on J.J. Hester to be the best version of himself every single time he steps on the field. And I just don't know that he's that guy, despite the great play he made in the Auburn game. But, man,
I don't know if we've ever seen a team, and this is counting the Stoops teams that had like kickers playing receiver and stuff. If you looked at the preseason depth chart of Oklahoma's offense, and you looked at Sawchuk and Jackson Arnold and the receiver, I've never seen an offense just turn over like this where none of the guys we were looking to see are on the field.
Yeah, it's really depressing for Oklahoma fans who had to spend this entire offseason, really the entire last few years, answering the questions about depth and what's it going to look like when you join the SEC. And I'm not saying that just playing in the SEC did this to them because they were dealing with injury issues before they got into conference play. So it's not necessarily like just they got into the meat of the SEC, they can't handle this. Like, no. That's not the case. They were banged up in non-conference play. They were banged up before the season even started. Go back to that Temple game. So I just think that it was a day in which you knew you didn't have a chance once Texas went up 14-3. And that is such a brutal reality to accept. And it's one of the reasons why I kind of look at this personnel and go, I get why Brent Venables made this move because you realize you need to have some threat. And Michael Hawkins is a threat as a runner. But when even he is struggling with the ball security issues, you wonder, what's it going to take for Jackson Arnold to get in a football game again? Because that's what got him pulled against Tennessee. And they were having the same issues with Hawkins. And the ball security was a problem. And against an elite defense, he really, really struggled. He was obviously in a tough spot against that defense with those injury issues.
I mean, if you're Jackson, this sounds bad, guys, but it's real. Like, if you're Jackson Arnold, like, I don't know if you don't just politely refuse that because you're probably going to hit the portal anyway. Nah. Receivers are all hurt.
You only get so many opportunities to play college football. You put good film out there. I'll agree to disagree with that. That's not the way a competitor is going to think. He's always going to think that he's
I know, but in this quarterback free agent market where it's like that could take you, like one more bad start could take you from like a Power 5 job where you have a chance to like, oh, you're at Rice, you're JT Daniels.
That's the fan perspective though. Like he thinks
I'm telling you what happened to JT Daniels is
I know.
Fact.
I know. I mean, JT Daniels at least got a cup of coffee at West Virginia as well. But the reality for their situation is that there's just no answer in sight. And your upside is so limited. You can't stay on the field with Texas for 60 minutes. It was telling that Oklahoma in those final minutes is just trying to get some good vibes and just trying to get into the end zone for the first time because they know. Yeah. Say it again.
You mean Oklahoma? You said Texas. Oklahoma was just trying to get in the end zone. Yeah.
Oklahoma's just trying to get into the end zone against Texas for the first time. And you know that Texas is going to say for the next 364 days, remember last year when y'all didn't score a touchdown in this game? Because, buddy, it was lopsided and it was not throw out the record books. It was one team is elite and one team has strengths, but one team is super, super limited, and we could see that by day's end.
Connor, is Texas back?
Not yet. No. We're not going there.
This is such a good bit. Cool, because this is like, I mean, that was kind of one of the few. I think that was the last couple of things. I think winning the SEC probably does it. This is like just a funny like little joke we have. I'm not like giving you crap about it, but it's like we all just wait for the bottom to fall out of Texas. But at the end of the day, they keep passing these tests. And at the end of the day, they're so far and away the most complete team in the SEC. And if you had talked to either of us, even in media days, and said, as an asset, right, like what would you rather have, Texas or Oklahoma? I mean, let's say you go back a year, you go back 2 years, it just Oklahoma is like 95% what you would take. And then after last year, it starts to get about 60-40. And then now it's like the other way. And you look at what Texas is doing in the modern era. Like I said, they have great coaches. Lincoln Riley is another guy that's the offensive guru that is not working out, right?
That's what I was saying, yeah.
Yeah, if you're Oklahoma, you go from the offensive guru to the defensive guy, right? Cool. Now you can't play complementary football. You've gone to a team that you couldn't play defense. Now you can't play offense. You are living in the twilight zone.
Will, how
Rough.
do you think it felt for Oklahoma fans watching the way that Saturday played out, knowing what was said this offseason about the quarterback situation, and then watching Dylan Gabriel find the answers to beat Ohio State?
Well, buddy, once again, as an LSU fan, I can tell you exactly how they felt as a team that played great defense for 27 years of my life and then decided to only play offense last year. It is rough. It's the most
Rough.
brutal thing in the world. If they had the most mid Mark Stoops offense, this team would be a playoff contender.
I don't think Dylan Stewart or Dylan Stewart. I combined Dylan Gabriel and Evan Stewart and came up with an actual human being, Dylan Stewart, confirmed swamp monster for South Carolina. I don't know that.
One of many.
I don't know that Dylan Gabriel would be lighting it up with the receiver issues that they have. He has much better surroundings at Oregon, but man, you can't help but go, we had it pretty good. And this year that has changed. But I think that still the takeaway is Texas is that team. I just love this Texas team. I really, really do. They have so quickly made us forget about the lack of depth in the backfield. I love that Ewers has poise, even though he's aware how much people talk about Arch constantly. I love that they do the fun things like the Matthew Golden jump ball that he throws up to Gunnar Helm, who, for my money, Gunnar Helm is the best receiving tight end, at least in the SEC. I love that they're just a walking, talking TFL that is just inevitable. And most of all, I love what Sark has done. I love the program that he has built. His team does not blink. It's talented, and it knows it's talented without being cocky. Texas deserves to be favored against Georgia. Period. Georgia fans, you know it. You absolutely know it. Texas is the better team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just, and I get it from Oklahoma fans. We talked to our guy Derek, who's an Oklahoma fan, and I get the perspective of, man, we spent almost our whole lives owning this Texas team, and now that we're in the SEC, like, we got to pretend like everything's different. But I think that what Texas is building is so sustainable. It's so crazy. I mean, like I said, in the NIL era, they're crushing recruiting. They're crushing the portal. They have one of the best coaching staffs. I mean, Sarkisian, as we talked about, probably the best schemer, offensive mind, arguably in football. I mean, he did great with the Falcons too, honestly. So at the end of the day, like, he's probably the best offensive mind in football. I mean, you could put, some of the guys like the guys in the NFL, 49ers guy, Shanahan, and don't want to take away from McVay, like that level of guy, but that's the level of guy we're working about here. Like, this is a guy who could be an NFL head coach because of his scheme. Maybe not his personality, but personality works great for college football because he's intense. He's an old school type of guy, as weird as that sounds for Steve Sarkisian, a guy who's able to hold his players accountable in a way that we never honestly thought we'd see from him. So, yeah, I'm super excited about what Texas brings. I think they look super cool. They're oddly easy to root for. And like I said, as an Oklahoma fan, I know that hits people in the soul because Oklahoma has been kind of a fluke. What's up?
They'll disagree with that.
I get it.
Texas is easy to root for. Yeah.
And Oklahoma has been that blue collar team. The Sooners, like this kind of smaller, scrappy state that has owned Texas, has gotten Kyler Murray, has gotten all these guys out of Texas. And I get it. And I rooted for you guys for most of our lives. But as we sit here as an SEC podcast and all we can do is discuss this rivalry with respect to the SEC, like, Texas has got the blueprint of new college football figured out. And that's something I never, ever, ever thought I would say.
No doubt. Can't wait for that one next week against Georgia. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Georgia fans, hopefully you do not go broke trying to finance that game.
Connor, have you ever heard of Big X the Plug?
I have not.
Next time you're in the gym, throw on some Big X the Plug. It's kind of like the soundtrack of Texas. He has a song called Texas. Whenever I imagine Texas smacking people, it's got Big X the Plug in the background. So give them a listen.
I imagine something very different. I just imagine Matthew McConaughey, dazed and confused, just sitting right at sitting at the arcade and just having that type of swag. That's
Zach Bryan, big moment for Well, he's Oklahoma. Oh my gosh, he's Oklahoma. He's from. He got big in Austin. So again, we're excited to have these new additions to the SEC. That's what I'm saying. This is a great rivalry.
It was fun. Yeah, very fun having this in the SEC.
Even if the final score didn't seeing that environment that started talking about in media days, seeing the field split down the middle, it was awesome. Like, I just want to hype up this rivalry. Both of these guys, we're just happy to have these teams here. It's super cool to talk about them, kind of as part of our job.
All right, South Carolina and Bama, Will. Bama nearly lost as a 3-touchdown underdog for the second consecutive week, in case you missed it. If that had happened, Bryant Denny would have melted down. I thought he was going to melt down when Nick Harbor appeared out of the heavens to make that grab. Oh, my God. Oh, play of his career so far. Not even close. That catch pulls South Carolina within 2. And I thought it was going to melt down when Alabama became the first team in roughly 10 years to unsuccessfully fall on an onside kick. Beamer ball at its finest, although Beamer ball is technically just being able to score with any unit on the field. It's not recovering an onside kick, but that's semantics. We don't need to get into that. Go figure that Damani Jackson, who got carted off the field earlier in the game, was the guy who makes the pick for Bama. And go figure that it was Malachi Moore who correctly instructed him to run out of the end zone, because if he didn't, that would have been a safety to tie the game. And it would have been 27-27 as time expired. And that would have been that you can't tell me that's ever happened in organized football, probably at the high school level, but a safety as time expires because of an interception. That would have been a wild sequence, but that didn't happen.
I'm glad you brought that up. The beanbag understanders, great job. You got to think Malachi Moore is just looking at Kane Womack like, look at me, I'm the coach now.
Right. I made the best instruction that they had all day. This is my show.
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. But my goodness, Bama looked like he was in control of this game. Up 14-0 with a minute 43 left in the first half. Not a game in which Bama was clicking on all cylinders, but it still appeared, all right, Bama should be in position to bounce back and not necessarily have a 60-minute game. And it was 4th and 9, and South Carolina is going for it. With all due respect to South Carolina's pass catchers, that's not really a spot where you expect, oh yeah, one of them's just going to go up and make a play. But Mazeo Bennett somehow gets 5 yards of separation, goes in for 6, touchdown. And the sequence after that was somehow worse. We had Jalen Milroe drift into a horrendous safety via an intentional grounding because Bama forgot that Kyle Kennard was like the SEC's leader in sacks, and someone should either block him or maybe have an offensive lineman on him instead of just a tight end. Whatever the case, no plan whatsoever for Kyle Kennard. But that wasn't even the worst part of that sequence, because on 3rd and 20, deep in your own territory with 10 seconds left in the first half after your quarterback had been totally overwhelmed by Kennard and that South Carolina pass rush, what does Alabama do? Opt for aggression.
Their
and
best.
Say it again.
They did their best.
They did not do their best. That was, look, I feel like I've been more of a Kalen DeBoer defender because you've been a Kalen DeBoer hater. So
Did I hate Kalen DeBoer? No. I hated Kane Womack, and I was right.
This plan of attack.
Let's not twist what happened. We don't have to talk about it. But that's what happened.
You can pull up the text. We don't need to do that.
If I said he looked over his head in the SEC, would I be right or wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think this Bama team looks over its head. We don't judge year one coaches in this show. We don't judge year one coaches in this show.
Losing to Vandy's all good. You're right. Continue.
Yeah. Look, Vandy's a good team. Will Vandy might go to a New Year's Six Bowl this year. Just kidding. That's the college football playoff. The part that was just so maddening was, what in the world are you doing on 3rd and 20 with 10 seconds left? You're not even close to field goal range. And it was a pre-2023 benching type of pick from Milroe. And then you just gift South Carolina 3 points. And instead of it being what probably should have been a 14-0 game going into the half, it's 14-12. Bama could have just gotten off the field on 4th and 9 against the number 14 passing offense in the SEC. Probably gotten maybe even a short field to make it a 17-0 game, make it a 3-score game going in the locker room. But instead, it imploded. 60-minute game. Woof. Bama survived this, but South Carolina showed us why Bama doesn't have championship DNA. We should not apply that to this team until further notice, because they're so bad in so many spots, Will. Bad at the tackle spots in pass pro. And I know that Milroe had only taken 7 sacks all year. He'd also only thrown 2 picks going into this game. But Will, you brought it up, and it was almost like Milroe was trusting scheme too much instead of just taking off and running in some of those spots.
Yeah, I agree. And like, I sent you the text that, the 3 things that Jalen Milroe did under Bill O'Brien that we didn't like, right? He took bad sacks.
He didn't play under Bill O'Brien, so that's not a fair comp. He didn't actually play under Bill O'Brien.
2 games he played under Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, but
when he came in and had some of the worst turnovers that we saw.
The Tommy Rees sample size is different than the Bill O'Brien sample size, though.
I don't understand what's confused. Like, we literally saw him start 2 games for Bryce Young under Bill O'Brien, and the criticism of him was exactly what I'm about to say, which is that he had terrible turnovers against Arkansas. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The turnovers that he had against Arkansas were, yes, he had.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So he started against Bill O'Brien. He was coming in for injured Bryce Young. And the things that we saw that were like, oh, this is giving Saban a headache. bad turnovers. Okay, so number 1 is bad fumbles. Number 2 is terrible sacks. Number 3 is inopportune picks. What I said to you at the beginning of the day, which we got vehemently disagreed with or whatever, but it happened. We saw a bad pick 6 against Vandy, right? We saw 3. We'll call it 1 bad sack if that's more amicable for everyone. That safety, oh my gosh! I mean, you just can't take that play as Jalen Milroe. When we talk about who is the best quarterback for an NFL prospect in the SEC, I know who it's not after the last 2 weeks. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be a veteran quarterback, you can't have these game-breaking mistakes when your offense is so clearly the strength of this team. And, we could talk about the great things this offense does on a play-to-play basis like I did. I was shocked when I saw the win rate, and I went, oh my gosh, no, wait, they are actually cooking people on offense. But Jalen Milroe is reverted back to the player, as I said, that we saw under Bill O'Brien, who is making these really unnecessary, costly penalties or like mistakes. And the thing that's crazy, and exactly to your point that I brought up, under Tommy Rees, he didn't trust the scheme. So he just took off. And we're seeing that you would almost rather have Jalen Milroe take off than roll out to the right, look around, throw a ball to the other team, take a safety when you're trying to ground the ball, overthink things. And honestly, I'm not kidding because I'm obviously not a Bama Hopium guy. In a way, you like to see that because it means he trusts the scheme and thinks the scheme will one day work. Whereas very early, he gave up on Tommy Rees. Like he was like, this scheme is basura. You couldn't beat.
Post benching, yeah.
Right. Like he benched him. Yeah. You couldn't beat USF without me. This is my show. Like when he showed up, we saw Jalen Milroe that was like, look, it was like the Malachi Moore thing reversed. It was like towards Tommy Rees. Like, buddy, I watched you in college and you weren't that good. I'm taking over this game. And I saw it over and over again. And so now he trusts the scheme. He trusts Ryan Williams, which he should. But at the end of the day, that's making him sit in the pocket and his tackles are getting cooked. And Kennard is, I mean, the crazy thing about Kennard, yeah, this week he's the best player on South Carolina's defense from a pass rush standpoint. You can make the argument it's been Dylan Stewart. You can make the argument Tonka Hemingway is another one of those guys. South Carolina has, I mean, pretty convincingly the best D-line in the SEC after Ole Miss just got 0 sacks.
Tennessee's, I would put Tennessee in line with that as well, as like a unit that, man, like they can just play with anyone.
Yeah.
They don't care if you got a 5-star offensive tackle. They don't care what you have. They can get after you. And if you don't have a plan, like Kentucky did not have a plan for South Carolina. And even when they did have a plan of triple protection against Dylan Stewart, it still didn't work. If you don't have a plan, you are going to get murdered. Like that's just what they're going to do. So I thought, yeah, I think that's a perfectly fair takeaway. I still don't think that Milroe is all of a sudden now that player again. I think he ran into a matchup that exposed that over the course of a full day, whereas with Vandy, I thought it was fewer plays wherein we saw some
but
of
in
those.
Big moments, and that's the exact thing I'm talking about.
I still would take Milroe over the vast majority of quarterbacks in college football.
I don't think he's trash. I'm just specifically going into what he's doing right now that's different from last year, which is, again, it's tough because it's not his fault. Like this offense is still a great offense. But if the defense is going to be running fewer plays than I do over the course of a CFP 25 game, then you need to be a great offense to.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. And there's more pressure on him. And so yeah, we definitely agree on that point. I still think he has it in him to be able to work through some of this stuff.
And he's got that dog in him. That's the thing. In terms of having that dog in you as a quarterback, I'll put him above Nussmeier. Because what he did against Auburn last year, what he did against Georgia last year, he's got that dog in him. He's an incredible athlete. He's a great decision maker. He has a cannon for an arm. He can find Ryan Williams in the dark. He has a lot going well for him. But that's what you got to clean up if you want to be a contender as Alabama.
Agreed. And Bama is not a contender, in my opinion, right now with what they still have to work through, because I still think the defense is a bigger problem. They got the gift of that Lenoris Sellers fumble immediately after the Milroe pick in the end zone. A Milroe pick, that pick I actually thought was a better play by Fortune in the end zone to recover on that play. That was way less egregious than I thought the earlier pick was. But nonetheless, it was an interception. And then Bama gets that gift where Sellers just fumbles at the mesh point. It happened, later on with Nico doing that as well. And it was nothing Bama did in that moment. But to Bama's credit, it was able to capitalize in the short field and get the touchdown there. South Carolina turned the ball over 4 times. One of which being that last-ditch heave at the end zone that we talked about before, and blowing that 2-point conversion where Sellers just throws it out of the end zone. That's what it took for Bama to win this game. That's a problem, because something tells me Tennessee, that atmosphere, a little bit less forgivable than what Bama was facing with its home crowd just in stunned silence at different moments of that game. But here's the good news for Bama. Kalen DeBoer wore a sweatshirt, so it's not a T-shirt that's causing Bama's issues.
Top of the list. Boom. Love it.
Gotta find the positives of a game like that. Bama had a ton of close wins in 21 and 22, and I was thinking about that over the course of this game. But here's what's different. After the Vandy loss, you thought maybe this would be a more disciplined defense. It's not.
Who thought that?
Not you. I'm saying
not
like
me.
the general.
That was right.
Yeah, you're right. You were right about that. The general public, more disciplined defense after that showing. Just has to be. They vowed to change. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Credit South Carolina for putting Bama in some of those spots where it just didn't seem like Bama could find an answer when they go on this run, and it's 3 consecutive scores to take the lead. But look, Bama has played in close games now against USF. Yes, that was a close game despite what the final score said. Vandy and South Carolina, which means based on the way that things have played out in the SEC, they're going to go win by 28 at Tennessee. Right? Watch that happen.
I'm so locked into that. Like I said, the amount of just raw video of watching Alabama's defense and Tennessee's offense, I'm so locked in. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like I know I'm kind of being like whatever about it, but there's nothing emotional about what I'm saying here. This is a bad defense. There's really nothing to it. This is a team that can't stop South Carolina. Now, again, South Carolina has a great pass rush. I think this game was very much for the taking. I think if you're a South Carolina fan, you're cooking yourself. I think you can't blame the refs this time. I think that at the end of the day, Vanderbilt did some things that South Carolina was unable to do. I think if you're a Dowell-Loggins disrespecter, this game is exactly why. I think that at the end of the day, I mean, chance after chance after chance after chance to beat this team South Carolina had. I know it's on the road.
Did you see after the Bennett touchdown? I think it was where it was a nice route, and Jesse Palmer said on the broadcast, he's like Dowell-Loggins, and I'm like, oh, he got his first and last name butchered after he finally schemed up a good look. Poor guy.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, there's so much. Like you look at Nick Harbor, and he makes this I mean, that is a guy that he could play for Alabama and then the Falcons, like Julio did, and I would still love him. I mean,
he could play for the USA track team, and I'd still love him.
He could play for Russia. I would still love him. He is so sick. Like he is the dopest. A guy that big that has that much body control. I mean, this is going to be insane cup. But when I was talking to my buddy, I was like, what Leonard Fournette lacked was body awareness. Right? He had the speed, he had the size, but he wasn't actually really that coordinated. Like Nick Harbor has that. Yeah. He has the ability to make these hand-eye coordination plays, because that was the issue with Fournette why he's not still in the league, is that he couldn't catch the ball. He didn't have that quick, true fast twitch athleticism, but he was just a freak. Nick Harbor has that. And so point being, the more I see plays like that, the more I'm furious this South Carolina offense. I understand that there's lots of positives here for South Carolina. I mean, you're 5 points away. LSU and Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. But at the end of the day, both of those teams were begging to be had. As an LSU fan, I was sitting there going, we're going to lose this game for the entire game. To your point, Bama got 14-0, but I didn't think Bama was controlling this game really at any point, because I knew they were always a bad turnover away. I knew they were a Milroe fumble, sack, interception, just like Vandy, and that ended up happening. And it's so weird. Beamer ball had a weird day. I'm not going to say that the roughing the kicker, I think that's just aggression. I'm fine with that. Some of the decisions
I hated that call.
I immediately see that was a fan take. I was like, and I was like, wait, you want your guys to go after the guy, but it's not a fan take. They should have been returning some of those kicks, man. I mean, they were playing with fire there. I think it was about 3 of those kicks, punts, where it was dude caught the ball, and there was an angry guy who was the best player in the history of his high school in Hueytown, Alabama, just at his neck, ready to knock his head off. And I remember Dylan Moses came on the scene. You don't want to see that. And so point being, it was a weird game because, of course, they recovered the special teams, the onside kick, and they scheme up. I mean, that guy was so wide open. But as a South Carolina fan, you got to sit here and it's okay, I think this quarterback is probably okay to a degree, but he's making some of the young mistakes. I'm not even kidding about this. At least KJ Jefferson's not lining it up. At least you're not hey, we can at least develop our guy internally. I think that Beamer needs another chance. I think they got to get Dowell-Loggins and Kane Womack and just put them on a raft and just drift it out to sea so we can watch better football until they got to play each other again, which is magical because neither of them has an idea what they're doing. So it's crazy because of the amount of athletes on these teams, right? Like you can see Nick Harbor and go, you put the ball around that guy and he can catch it. You see these two
I don't know
DBs
about
for
that.
Alabama.
I don't know. I'll disagree with that. I don't think he's shown enough to make me that confident.
When it comes to like a screen, like the same stuff I was talking about, get him a screen pass, get him a slant route that he could go on. Like same the Bama DBs, same deal. I was like, oh, I remember that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like all-time recruit. You look at Malachi Moore, like a Bama leader through and through. They have the personnel. So point being, I know as a South Carolina fan, this could be heartbreaking, but you've shown what Beamer can do well. You've seen some of the Beamer ball stuff against LSU and against Alabama. You've seen them develop this D-line into some swamp monsters. I really do think your coaching change away at the offensive coordinator position because I'm not out on Sellers just yet. I think as a runner, that's his first option. He got hurt in the LSU game, and he's not been that same level of mobile. We talked about it. You talked about it. I didn't talk. You brought this up and discovered this or shouted it out that against mobile quarterbacks, Alabama struggled. Sellers was like trying to go through his third and fourth read a lot in this game. And when you felt like you were like, Sellers, run, please.
Yep.
And like he was just like trying to develop into an NFL passer. It's like, brother, like take what's there. Just take off. It's easy. They're running man coverage, not even looking at you. They have no idea what the play is. Just take off. And he did that against LSU, right? And then he got injured. And Robbie Ashford, unfortunately, I might have to start selling the stock there because every time he gets in, it looks terrible. He had that one play where it bounced off the gentleman's hands. That was almost one of the greatest plays in South Carolina history. But alas, point being, like I just think that maybe like these quarterbacks are not world beaters in the way that Saints starter Spencer Rattler is. We'll see how that looks when this comes out. But when you don't have that great quarterback, when you don't have these leading receivers like Leggett and to a degree Juice Wells, they didn't play a lot last year. When you have this young team, it falls on your offensive coaching staff, and they just didn't have it. And so, yeah, I really do like what Beamer's building. I think that the hard parts, fixing that offensive line, oh my goodness, getting like they were so clearly tougher up front than Alabama on both lines. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama was struggling to get pressure on Sellers at certain points. Now they still were able to at other points, and it felt like he was kind of overwhelmed when he was staying in the pocket. But yeah, like there were some running lanes that were there for him. South Carolina is better than they were last year. It's very simple. They're better than the 5-7 team that we saw, and the majority of what we've seen from them in SEC play was good. And Beamer said at halftime, he's like, "Yeah, we put a crap game against Ole Miss last week, but for the majority of what we've done in SEC play." Yeah, we've looked like how I thought we were going to look, and they are right there. That's just so frustrating when you can't seize those moments down the stretch because they were there and they created a lot of those moments, but just can't have that many mistakes. Can't turn the ball over 4 times and win Tuscaloosa, even if Bama is a shell of its former self at this point.
Yeah, I hope the South Carolina administration does not overreact to this game or these couple of like the losses because you've really, really, really shown some fight, like I said, and it's so fixable to me. I mean, like I said, the hard parts you've done well. You've fixed one of the worst offensive lines in the SEC. The D line is like, oh my God, the way that you found these guys who were not super heralded recruits and developed them after. I mean, they lost their D line coach like ahead of last year. Like they're trying to like build guys in and figure this out. So I just want to say, like, if we're in this place where you either can be a portal team or a building team, looks like they're building something, and they better not try to get the Taco Bell. Because the things they're doing are interesting, man. And once Sellers gets some progression, once he gets a good play caller, I think he could be an area. Once he gets healthy, I'm really excited by the South Carolina team, man.
Counterpoint: Kyle Kennard transfer.
I mean, no, I know, but they're building. That's what I'm saying. They're building with what they have. Like that's Rocket Sanders is another guy we didn't know. Like I remember Beamer being like, "We haven't really seen the guy. We're doing rocket science." Was his quote. He looked awesome. He looked healthy. He's starting to get back, and we saw it against LSU. Starting to get back to the Rocket that we saw in year one. And so, like, that's the thing. If you can't run the ball with your quarterback, just give it to Rocket. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys have the answers internally.
We still got 2 games, so we're running long. We got to move on.
Sorry.
You're getting fired up about South Carolina, man. I know that was a game that South Carolina felt
they
like
almost beat Alabama. That's so exciting for them.
I know, but yeah, it's just so close yet so far in those 2 key games, obviously LSU and Bama. All right, Mississippi State and Georgia.
This I'll be short on.
Yeah, this Georgia team, man. It's just so weird compared to past Kirby teams because they aren't disciplined defensively and they throw the ball a ton. I mean, Carlsbad threw the ball, like 34 times in the first half of this one? I was going through, I was like, how many times did Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett throw 34 times in a game? And it was like 6 combined or something like that. But, man, I can't remember who said it on Twitter, but I saw some Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma comps for this Georgia team, which is so weird. And I'm not going to go that far.
Beck threw the ball 48 times in this game.
Yeah, and it felt like even more,
Jeez.
if we're being honest. But Mississippi State became the second Georgia foe in the last 3 weeks to throw for 300 yards. And that was after Georgia did not allow 300 yards passing once last year. Even Malachi Starks got fooled on one of those Mississippi State touchdowns. Like, they just don't have those guys that Kirby can put on islands and feel particularly good about. And I know we were saying that down the stretch in 22, and they were able to kind of work through that. Stark said afterwards, like, things have to change with that unit. They just have to. And he's right. And I want to give Jeff Lebby credit for going into that building and scheming, because there were times where it felt a bit hypo Mizzou-ish with what they were doing against Kirby's offense, like circa 2017-18 with Drew Lock, and some of the things that they were doing there, where you're like, oh, didn't expect that chunk play to be there. All of a sudden you're looking up, you're like, oh, Kevin Coleman, he's got some room. Wow, okay. This is a passing game that's kind of humming and kind of feeling itself. And Georgia at this point, I'm stunned that the spread was as large as it was. It was like 33.5 for this one. You just kind of wonder, what's the result in the SEC that's going to stun us at this point anymore? Because we've already seen probably what would be like the most stunning result coming into the season of Vandy beating Bama. But this is a game wherein Mississippi State played competitively with a top 5 team from the SEC, just as they did against Texas, until they ultimately, Texas has a better fourth quarter to make that game look more lopsided than it was with Arch starting. But like, what results in this conference are going to stun us at this point? And why do we expect Georgia to look the part against SEC competition from start to finish? Because if it hasn't happened now, I don't think that can be the weekly expectation anymore for this team.
Yeah, I think that's, like I said, I have one takeaway with this game, which is that, man, the back end of this defense looks bad. And that's something I never thought I would say about like that. And again, like early, against Alabama and everything, I was ready to, talk about offense and everything, because I couldn't have imagined that we would be 6 games into a season and we just don't know what we're doing. Like, guys just don't. The front part of the defense is fine and sound. Fine, not great, fine. Back into this defense, I've watched a ton of defenses that look like that since about 2020. I'll put it to you like that.
They have a run defense that's not even top 50. That wasn't the issue in this game.
Yeah,
that was. I don't think it's fine. I don't think it's good by Georgia standards. They're not top 50 in yards per carry and rushing yards per game. So that like, at least they weren't coming into this game.
Yeah.
And Mississippi State looked and said, "What's our mismatch? What's our best chance?"
Right.
For them to attack that secondary, I think that's pretty telling. And I thought it was telling what Georgia was trying to do with just saying, we're going to have Carson Beck work through his issues. Still had some bad mistakes in this game too. I guess when you throw the football that much, maybe that's inevitable. But golly, like they were just saying, we don't care if we are throwing this at such high volume that it makes Georgia fans of yesteryear pull out their hair. This is our best plan. We need to attack their secondary. And that plan worked, and it was effective, and they did some things well in the passing. I love Dylan Bell, the play that he made in the back of the end zone. Dylan Bell is so freaking good, man. He really is. And I feel like he always gets kind of lost in the shuffle of, because he's not this freakishly athletic player in the way that we like our hybrids to be. But he's been a real difference maker. I would like to see more big time plays from London Humphreys. I talked about him as a guy that needed to step up with this Colby Young absence, and he had his moments in this one, but still, like, you kind of need more out of him. But Georgia's just a difficult team right now to figure out, because we still don't truly know what is the thing that you can absolutely hang your hat on. And that's why they played down to competition so much. I put that in air quotes, because at this point, if you're playing down to that competition every single week, you might just be that competition. That's the reality that we probably have to accept for Georgia.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, so what they do well. We're excited about Aaron Smith playing well. We're excited about Dylan Bell playing well. So that's good. That feels a little new. Right,
Trevor Etienne looks good. Trevor Etienne looks fine. They're featuring him a lot, which is good, but not a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's okay. So, positives. Passing game outside of, like, kind of some of the suspect decisions by Carson Beck, but when you throw the ball 50 times, a la Nussmeier, right? Good thing, again, didn't give up a sack. Okay. So your passing game is appearing to be sound. Still don't I regret so much saying 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because it was a euphemism and not really what Georgia was doing, because they don't have the backs for that. Georgia's going to get easy plays with Carson Beck, and likely the tight ends, likely ETN in the pass game. if we can truly count on Arian Smith and Dylan Bell in those situations, that is what this offense does well. I think we finally saw on the top end what this offense can look like against Mississippi State, which we said in the pregame, if you don't do that against Mississippi State, you got big problems. So I don't think it proved it to me, but I think that we saw what they were trying to do.
You're like, we got to try everything. We got to try everything with our passing game, because if we can't figure this out, we're not going to figure it on the road at Texas.
Exactly. So I think, like I said, simple takeaway for me. We saw what they were trying to do. I think they will not be a power running team this year. Their rushing stats are a little bit skewed by, number one, not giving up a sack. We just talk about sack adjusted. I get that. The one long carry by Anthony Evans kind of takes them from like a 150, from like 100 yards to about 150. Don't think the rushing attack was great in this game, but again, I think their passing attack was pretty good. But again, that's against Mississippi State, which is an offensive head coach. They got smoked by Toledo, right? On the back end, that's not good, because when you play subpar competition, what they do well matters, and what you do well does not matter, because they're subpar competition. If you want to be compared to Mississippi State, let's have that conversation. Exactly your point. I think that this is, in yesteryear, I would have said this is the game that gets Kirby fired up at the DBs, where they all get in and they say, hey, who's the guy Rob they got from Alabama? Robinson.
Yeah, Tavares Robinson. Am I blanking on this?
We know. That I'm trying to find what changed, because at the end of the day, when something gets like Alabama's defense as well, when something changes, you got to really go back and fix it, because this is a problem. So that's my thing. Again, I wouldn't exactly say they controlled this game, but I never thought Georgia was going to lose this game. It's better to have exactly what we keep saying. It's better to have your destiny in front of you. It's better to have all that. On the other side, this is when Kirby Smart has been effective, is when he's had something to yell about. That being said, here's the second point I want to talk about. Not fired up about him pushing that player. Don't think that was great. Can we discuss that?
That was weird.
That
was weird. Kirby, I understand he blacks out from rage at points, and he's kind of explaining it afterwards, and stuff like that happens in the heat of competition. Weird. Like, if you're, it was almost like he thought it was his. It's like when you're a parent and you think you're disciplining your own kid, and then you realize it's someone else's kid. It's almost like he thought it was one of his guys. In that moment, he was just so locked in on what was happening. And
Connor, why are you screaming about long snapping to a random toddler? What's going on? There's the long snapping guy again. I see you in the playground.
That's not the forum we practice, Claire. What are you talking about? Claire, my name's Timmy. What are you talking about? It was almost like one of that, and that sounds dismissive, and maybe that's not the right tone. But, I mean, it kind of spoke to how enraged Kirby was at different points of that game, where, they had a penalty in that game. I can't remember who it was that committed it, but it was a late hit, and it extended the drive, and Kirby just reamed the guy on the sideline. And that's different when it's 42-10 and Georgia's doing Georgia things, and it's like, oh, look at Kirby, he's getting all riled up again about something like this. Of course he is. But it's when we're seeing it play out in these games that Georgia is just allowing teams to hang around. It takes on a different tone.
Right.
And I mean, you got to probably be better and not push a player in the opposing team in that moment. Not to go full Woody Hayes, but I
had to go for Woody Hayes. Like, that's kind of my thing, is like, I have said this, and I'm sorry that I'm real, but I've said this for years. If a different coach did this, we'd be having a different conversation. I'm not even going to say, because what's going to be going on Twitter is, what if Deion Sanders did this?
Oh, gosh.
Let's talk about what if any coach, what if Brian Kelly did this? Mark Stoops, pick the most random coach you could think about. Let's go Mark Stoops, because he's pretty neutral. Not Lane Kiffin, not Drink, who people have opinions of. If you saw Mark Stoops,
what if Dabo? Did it?
If Dabo did this, buddy,
I mean,
goodness. They would shut down. They would put an EMP blast in Clemson, South Carolina, where you couldn't access the internet there. So, being like, that's all I'm saying. I'm not going to go and tell you what this means, but you know what this means. Just like, if you're going to try to hold your players, is exactly weirdly what I said about Steve Sarkisian. If you're going to be able to hold your players accountable, you need to be able to show that you carry that. Steve Sarkisian has kind of turned that around, where earlier in his career, he was this kind of like, laissez-faire type of guy. He had his own struggles in his personal life, and he has become a more disciplined guy. He's not exactly the guy who's yelling at people on the sidelines anymore. He had issues with rage too earlier in his career, right? We saw him pushing like random staffers. He hasn't done that as much.
Guard.
Yes. Yeah. Now, again, we haven't seen him in losses. Like that losses tell a lot about you, right? We saw Nick Saban do some wild stuff in losses. Like, point being, I understand how competitive these guys are, but man, these are, at the end of the day, I know NIL, I know transfer portal, I know we try to turn these guys into professional athletes, but if you're a grown man pushing somebody else's son on another team, shouldn't do that. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Not great for a coach that is taking it on the chin with 7 players getting arrested this year. Kirby's brand overall could be doing better.
Yep.
Just say that. Let's leave it at that. All right. Let's close with some Diego Pavia.
Oh, yeah.
We weren't going to bet against him. Of
course not.
Come on. You ride the Pavia train as far as it will possibly go. A game in which he wasn't great, but the grit that dude showed, gosh, how can you not be inspired by that guy? He's got offensive linemen coming up to him in the interview with Cole afterwards saying Pavia for Heisman and stuff. Like, you just see how quickly he has become that dude. And it's wild to think that Vandy was the last team in the SEC to name a starting quarterback. We're like, it's going to be Pavia. Come on. We know it's going to be Pavia. After he brought over, Clark Lee brings over the entire state of New Mexico, it was going to be him leading this team. And you see in a game in which he was not the same player that we saw against Alabama. And Kentucky did a lot of things to frustrate him. Those busted coverages weren't necessarily there. Cole made the joke in that interview afterwards, after Pavia throws the ball into the stands. He's like, was that your longest throw of the day? Because it felt like it. I mean, they didn't have to. They didn't necessarily have to. And still, Pavia with a banged up knee, ankle, whatever it is, he's running with a limp like throughout the second half. Vandy was the more desperate team. Vandy got after Kentucky's Big Blue Gate. They frustrated them once again. Kentucky's offensive line looked like it was facing South Carolina all over again. And Vandy was the more desperate team. And you can't help but think that box score impressive stats or not, that Pavia is such a big part of that identity. Vandy has a true identity. Vandy's a solid football team, Will. Vandy is not fluky. Nothing they did at Kentucky was fluky to win that game. You were stunned that that line was what it was after the way that it played out, because Vandy was simply better, and they won that battle in the trenches. How about, I mean, I have some Kentucky thoughts that we can get to, but anything more on Pavia on your end?
I think oddly, Clark Lee and Diego Pavia are like a complete, like, dynamic duo, whatever you call it, Batman and Robin. Like, did you hear Clark Lee's speech at halftime for Alabama?
I haven't listened to that yet. My 2 days without power, and I didn't. Yeah, there were some things on the internet I just missed out on.
I mean, dude, you're crushing it. It's really hard to tell you didn't have power. I can't smell you from here, but I think that you're pretty.
We showered every day. We're good. Took a little bit of a cold shower. I'm not as gritty as Diego Pavia, but we got through it.
Yeah. So point being, like, his halftime speech was like, "You can win this game. This is within you. Trust yourself. Go close this game." It was not some crazy was it strength and conditioning coach? Can't think of blanking on his name. That was
Cochran?
him. Yeah, it wasn't some crazy Scott Cochran speech. He was literally, "You guys got this." And on the other side, Diego Pavia is like, "I'm going to shove a sword through your throat and then like dab on you." And like, that's when you see like the Kobe Phil Jackson, when you see like the yin and the yang of the calm, balanced guy who's like brings that element. And that's the thing that Lee's teams have had that we haven't loved, is that they have felt like they've kind of hung their heads. And we know he can be kind of an intense guy, but that's been the vibe of his team. Well, Bobby is the exact opposite. I feel like I want to go straight up and play for Vanderbilt right now. I don't think they have me, but it seems like a fun place to be. A situation that was so hopeless, like we've been joking about. These are two guys that have gaslit everyone around them and are thinking that these games were winnable, and they are. I mean, they've won 2 of these games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, to win on the road like that, it shows that this was not a fluke. They handled success extremely well after they were the national darling all week. We talked about how they handled that, and that did not look like a team that was just taking time off, not watching film. They looked one step ahead of
Pavia
Kentucky.
got a podcast. He got his own Talk Tua. I mean, like all the signs were on the wall for this to be a dud game.
If I can become a guest on the Diego Pavia podcast, that would be an all-time feat. Like, oh yeah, go and find mom, like do some stuff on like SEC Network. No, like be on the Diego Pavia podcast. That's
a little home and home with Diego. I'm on here.
Seriously, he's chatting up Johnny Manziel during the week on ESPN. Like, and Vandy handles it. Like Vandy is a team that, even as I look at that remaining schedule, and they have the Texas game coming up, Vandy, they could just be in all these games. They could. They lost to Mizzou. Now looking back on it, and the loss to Georgia State, wherein seriously go back and watch the throw that was made in the final minute of that game for Georgia State to take the lead. Vandy is not that far from being 6-0. It's It's not that crazy, and I'm usually not the person
with the
that
best
says,
resume in America. I saw a tweet like that.
right?
Where it's like, hold on,
Put them in the top 25. Put them in the
Yeah.
top 25. There's not 25 teams in college football better than Vandy. Simple. It's simple as that, and that is crazy. That is something we have not said in the playoff era post James Franklin. But they are that team. They're going to be difficult. All right, Kentucky side, real quick.
Yeah.
They are 1-9 in their last 10 SEC home games, and Vandy was the team that started that streak November of 2022. I joked in the preview about how my brother and sister-in-law, they were at this game, and simply by virtue of traveling 7 minutes from their house to Kroger Field, they will have seen half of Vandy's SEC wins in the 2020s. Yes, they can now say that they've done that. This Kentucky team that just does not show up at home to match the intensity that they come out with. They are undisciplined. They can't even get a hold right, for crying out loud. I mean, they can't hold the football. They got a great kicker, and they can't even hold for the poor guy. Just terrible. Offensively, like they cannot move the football. This offensive line is a total liability. The transfers that they've tried to add in there have not worked out. It's a shame for a program that just came off a monumental win against Ole Miss, but Jekyll and Hyde, man, you just don't know what you're going to get from Kentucky. I guess maybe just Kentucky's going to play better on the road than it will at home, but really, really tough setback for Mark Stoops to come out that way after you had all the momentum in the world for what you did in Oxford.
Yeah, I feel like all of these teams, as I'm doing the wrap up here and I click on their schedule, I feel like that like sound from TikTok is hitting me because next they're at Florida. I'm just like, oh, how's that going to go? So yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I don't even think it's super.
That's the only SEC win that they've had in that 10-game stretch, by the way, of home SEC losses. 1-9 in their last 10 SEC home games, and the lone win was that game against Florida where they ran all over them with Ray Davis.
How about that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah. Point being, like I don't know. I mean, I think this Kentucky team has become what we were kind of like. That was the least possible outcome after the Georgia and Ole Miss game, which is they're just not super interesting, right? Yeah. Like it's like, wow, you guys were horrible against South Carolina, that you played Georgia close and you beat Ole Miss. Like maybe you guys were just sleepy. No, I think this is just a boring team. I think this is a team that if you could let them play 1982 football, they're fine at it. I think once the other team scores like 20 points, it becomes an issue. Georgia didn't score 20 points. Ole Miss didn't score 20 points. Vanderbilt did. Seems like a pretty easy team to figure out, to be honest with you. You want them at home, not on the road.
Troubling. Very, very troubling. All right, let's close with some Ryan Bamford. I got suckered into.
The tweet was electric, dog.
Look, I tweeted. It's the second I saw that clip of Mizzou walking into the UMass locker room, I was like, buddy, this is gone the second it leaves the bat. Reese Davis is on there just like, how is Mizzou playing in this football game? I tweet out that clip, and I think it's got like 2.5 million views or something like that. And I've got UMass people in my mentions galore. I think UMass's collective tweeted it out too. And it was like UMass fans in my mentions, the vast majority of them saying
collective.
Yeah. Like I had UMass fans in my mentions saying this is embarrassing. A lot of people are like, oh, why is it so embarrassing that an SEC team is playing at a group of 5 teams? It's like, well, first of all, it's the facilities. It's entirely the facilities. You can tell me SEC teams have bad locker rooms. Buddy, look at that clip and tell me that's not a middle school locker room that they're walking up to. If you haven't seen the viral clip, I can't remember the name of the guy who tweeted out like the picture of the tour of the Vandy facilities that he just walked up to. But high schools in that state are playing at nicer facilities. Luther Burden getting hurt in this game was brutal. But Ryan Bamford, he suckered me. He sold me on UMass minus 20 or plus 27.5. And you know what? It is not a Ryan Bamford flex game. It is a Ryan Bamford flex sell. And he sold me, and I'm okay with that. I got bammed.
You know what's funny too, man? I know this is a bit, but like, unfortunately, we got to give him even more credit because now everyone's talking about how bad their facilities are, and the NIL sharing the stuff.
I'm convinced that his collective tweeted out that video or retweeted my clip just to get it out there more for UMass people to be able, like, we need to donate money.
We can't even have company over. They're going to laugh at us. You can't even put us on national television. We got to get these facilities fixed. Don't worry about the team's record how they played today. That's right, Bamford shell game. It doesn't matter if they win this game. They couldn't compete. They had a tracker on their field.
Unbelievable. But yeah, UMass let me down. I actually went perfect picking against the spread in all the other SEC games except lock of the week, and 2-5 now lock of the week. So we're in it. We're dealing with some tough times, but nonetheless, that's all right. That's a full pod. That's a long, lengthy pod. A lot of stuff happened in week 7. Great slate. Week 8, it's going to be fantastic games that we have coming up in the SEC this week. If you haven't, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sound South, at CJ Bear, at Ghost of Art. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.